everyone, and welcome to our next virtual STEAM class. Today we're going to be making our very own crystals using salt. So this should be something that everybody has at home. Now, with our experiment, we want to have as many different types of salt as possible. So when I went through my cupboards, I have sea salt and I have table salt. So you can use either of those. You can also use Epsom salt if you happen to have that at home, like what you put in the bath. So they'll all grow different sorts of crystals, and I'm not going to tell you which ones grow which sorts of crystals, so you're going to have to try it to find out. So the first thing that we need is hot water. I use the kettle to make mine. You can also just put yours on the stove to boil. Make sure you get some parent help with this part. And salt. Then we're also going to need some clear jars, or even glasses will work well. Make sure you use glass instead of plastic because the water will be very, very hot and we don't want to melt plastic at all. So this is going to be something we're going to need a little bit of parent help with. And then we also need some pencils or sticks. Popsicle sticks will work fine. Scissors, yarn, and a measuring cup so that we can make sure we're getting the right amounts of everything in our solution. So what we're going to be doing today is making crystals by adding too much salt to water. Now we're going to do this in a really cool way. So if you know anything about molecules, they're like the smallest parts that make up everything, and they're always bouncing around, they're always moving. So when we make something hot, like hot water, it makes it move even faster. And what this does is it makes more room between the molecules. So if they're usually like this, and we warm up the water, then they're gonna be like this. So what that means is we can sneak some more salt into our water solution. So this is a word that we've talked about before. Solution is what happens when we mix two things together. So this is like chemistry, just like what we talked about in last week's STEAM class. So make sure you check out that video below if you haven't seen it either. So what we're gonna do is in our glasses, we're gonna be growing crystals. So what we need first is a very little bit of water. So let's start with about a half a cup of water. So I'm gonna be paying attention to the lines on my measuring cup here, and I'm gonna go to a half cup. So I'm going to use the super hot water I have. This is freshly boiled, so it's really, really hot. Make sure you get some parent help with this. And I'm going to pour it in until I have half a cup of hot water. You can see the steam. Because the hotter this water is, the more space between the molecules, which means that we can put a lot of salt into this water, less than if it was cold. If this water was cold, it would fit a lot less salt. Now, when you put too much of a powder like salt into a liquid like this, it's called super saturating. So that's a fun word you could try and teach someone. So basically, if you put more powder into the liquid than it can usually hold at room temperature, you've super saturated it. So we're gonna do two. The first one, I'll start off with my sea salt. And we're gonna add in little amounts, but we're hoping to be able to get a quarter cup to a half a cup of salt. So if we want to measure that out ahead of time to see what that would look like, let's see. I need to turn it around so I can see my measurements. All right, and I've got about a quarter cup of salt in here. So we want to try and fit at least that much salt in our hot water. So I'm going to start by going just one scoop at a time and stirring it in. Now, our water is really, really hot, so it's going to dissolve the salt. We want to try and fit in as much hot water as we can, so we're going to go a little bit at a time. So once I've stirred in, my first scoop is totally dissolved now. I'm going to add another scoop of salt. And the goal is to try and mix in as much salt as we can fit in this water before it will stop dissolving. Because when the salt stops dissolving in the water, that means that the water is fully saturated and it can't fit any more salt molecules in here and mix properly, because that's when the salt will just stay at the bottom. Now this works out to be really cool for our crystals, because as the water cools down, suddenly it can't hold that much salt anymore. So that means that the salt is going to start to recrystallize, and we're going to give it somewhere to recrystallize so that it grows our super cool salt crystals. So hopefully you have at least 2 different kinds of salt, and we're also going to be trying to have different locations for our crystals to grow. For example, do you think a crystal will grow better in bright sunlight or maybe in a shady cupboard? What about in the fridge? So the more clear containers you have to test this out, you can test out different combinations and keep track of all of your different combinations using the sheet that I have linked below. We have a cool little tracking sheet where you can tell us about what all of our crystals look like. And then we'll see which ones grow the best, because I want to see which one of you can grow the biggest crystal, and you can tell us how you got there by using your tracking sheet. So if you happen to take pictures while you're doing this, or take pictures of its growth later on, then you can show us. So now this is my 3rd scoop here, I believe, and it's not really dissolving anymore. So I think that that's about as much as I can fit in there. And as you can see, I don't have very much left. So I fit almost a 1/4 cup. So now that that's in there, I'm gonna pour it into one of my jars. Be careful with this part again, because it's gonna be hot water. Okay, so now I've got my jar filled with this sort of cloudy looking salty liquid. Okay? Now what we need is our string, because our string is going to be what our salt crystal grows onto. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie one end to a pencil, or you could use a popsicle stick too. If you have a popsicle stick, that would work just as well. Basically anything that can lay along the top of the cup. I have my dog here keeping us company. She's a science dog. I've taken her to school before, so she's very smart. And we're going to measure how tall our string can be and not touch the bottom of the cup, because if it's touching the bottom of the cup, our crystals will end up at the bottom of the cup instead of all attached to the string, which will look really cool. So I'm going to cut my string so that I have some dangling down, but it's not going to be able to touch the bottom of the cup. And we're going to put it in here. And my string is being uncooperative, so I'm going to poke it with my spoon, because I want it to sink completely. Poke, 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 poke. There we go. Okay. Now I have one of my jars is ready to go and ready to grow its crystals. So, I'll set this one aside. And you can do the same thing with your other jar and use a different type of salt. We can also add some food coloring to our mixture. So, I'm going to leave one of mine clear so I can see the difference, and then I'll use food coloring in the other one. So I'm going to put another 1/2 cup of water in here. And we're going to dump that salt, because now I want my table salt instead of my sea salt. And while we're doing this, I'd love it if you could make some predictions and tell the person standing next to you what you think is going to happen and which salt you think will have the best crystal effect. Now, I would bet you that bigger salt crystals might make bigger crystals. That's my hypothesis. So I'd love to hear what your hypothesis is. So go ahead and put that in the comments down below, or send it our way on social media. Okay. There we go. Nice cloudy liquid. Perfect. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pour it into my jar, but this time I'm going to add some food coloring. And you want to make sure that your jars are nice and clean too, because that way it won't interfere with the crystals at all. So I'm going to make this one red, because I think that'll look really cool when it grows. Okay. Ooh, look, this one is much foggier looking than the other one, and look at the cool food coloring coming down in it. How neat is that? That is fun. So I'm not even going to stir it, because I want to see how that happens. So you can decide yourself. Do you want to stir this in so it mixes completely, or do you want to let it sort of sit like that, because that's kind of fun too. So it's up to you, because you are the scientist. All right, I'm going to tie my string onto my pencil again. This can be a little tricky, so it's okay if you need some help with this part. Okay, and then I'm going to test and see how long my string can be. Okay, cut the string, and in it goes. And again, my string is a little floaty, so I'm just going to poke it down with my spoon. Get in there. Perfect. All right, so So now I have another one ready to go to grow a crystal. And this one is sort of red, cool looking. So now I have my red one, which has table salt. See, now I'm gonna have to try and remember which is which. And I have my clear one, which is sea salt. So, which one do you think is gonna grow better crystals? Since I only have 2 jars, I'm gonna put both of mine in a nice bright window because I wanna see what happens to these in a nice bright window. If you're able to do 4 experiments, then I would maybe do 2 in a nice bright window and maybe 2 somewhere else, somewhere darker without sunlight, and see what grows better. What kind of salt grows best, and in what kind of light does it grow best? So I'd love it if you could let us know your results, especially if you give this a try, and please send us more pictures as they start to grow too. I'll be sure to post some pictures of mine as they start to grow as well so you can see what they're looking like. And remember, if you need any more science help, let us know. I'm looking for more suggestions for more videos. If there's anything, parents, if there's anything that you're struggling a little bit with trying to make fun at home during this time, let me know, because making learning sneaky fun is my favorite thing to do. So let me know if you need any help, and I would love to come up with a new experiment that we could all do together. Thanks, bye.